Hey, I'm Circle Strafe, and welcome to episode 6 of my Dante's Inferno rundown. In the last episode, we talked about the structure of hell and met the Minotaur at the start of the 7th circle. In this episode, we're going to cover 2 of Circle 7's subcircles. These are violence against one's neighbours and violence against oneself. In the last episode, we talked about the modern day effects of Dante's work on public consciousness, media, and general contemporary life. What we're going to briefly do today is talk about why his work was so largely read in comparison to other scholars of the time. Essentially where that tide of fame for the Inferno originally stemmed from, which helped to turn it into this globally accepted literary masterpiece. It's important to point out that Dante wasn't just any regular man back when the poem was released. Dante was quite a famous and successful statesman. He had a history of political office and a reputation for being impartial and uncorrupted. He was also very intelligent, with a ridiculously diverse education. His education importantly included incredible prowess in linguistics. Dante discarded full Latin for his works and wrote in a common dialect that he promoted and greatly advertised called Italian. Italian was pulled from various regional variations, most chiefly Tuscany. There were also some pieces of Latin in there for good measure. This masterstroke made Dante basically the father of the modern Italian language. Some people in France actually still refer to Italian as La Language de Dante because of his massive influence on the original conception. This new way of presenting language meant that regular people could mostly understand what Dante was writing about. The poem wasn't initially widespread just because of its content, but because it was one of the first to be readable by a larger, more varied group of people. The reaction to this was that scholars were given a canvas outside of Latin to present their literative works for the first time, cascading down many new and exciting stories that were no longer consigned to the elite and the educated. After escaping the infamy of Crete, which is what Dante names the Minotaur, our 2 poets approach a river of boiling blood called the Phlegathon. Within it are those that were violent against their neighbours, covered in the blood of the river just as they were covered in blood in their lifetimes. As any soul tries to leave the river, it is immediately set upon by one of 1,000 angry centaurs. The centaur fires an arrow at it to put it back in its place. Virgil and Dante are suddenly set upon by many of the centaurs lining the river. Virgil demands to see the centaur leader. He yells,
"Bring me Chiron."
He names a few of the centaurs to Dante as they jostle Chiron forward to speak. Dante is actually doing very peculiar things, like moving rocks as he walks. Chiron asks the other centaurs if they notice that Dante is causing changes to the environment. Virgil confirms that Dante is a living man, and explains to the centaurs,
"We're on a journey from God, and you will do well to assist us."
He demands an accompaniment of a herd of centaur warriors, and for Dante to ride on Chiron's back. Virgil wants the centaurs to guide them to a shallow part of the river, so that Dante may pass through it safely and unobstructed. After some negotiations, Chiron selects Nessus, the being who raped the wife of Hercules and inadvertently caused his death. Chiron tells Nessus to protect and guide the pair and allow them to ride on its back. Whilst trotting towards the shallows of the bloody boiling river, Dante sees screaming sinners flailing inside. Virgil instructs Dante to listen to Nessus for a while. Nessus names a few of the souls within this first subcircle. One of the souls, up to his throat in blood, is named as Guy de Montfort, the murderer of Prince Henry. There's Azelino and Appiso de Este, Ghibellines with violent intentions. Nessus tells of Dionysus I and II, colloquially named the Tyrants of Sicily. He points out Alexander the Great and Attila the Hun, or as Dante names him, the Scourge of God. Dante notices that the depth of blood changes according to the nature of the sinner. Some were ankle deep, and others were completely submerged. After finally passing through the river, Dante dismounts Nessus, and the 2 poets continue on without him. Dante and Virgil find themselves heading towards a pathless woodland. Walking into the trees away from the river, Dante instantly notices something wrong with the place. The trees have black leaves and unruly poisonous briars. They bear no fruit, and their branches are being gnawed on by strange horrific winged creatures. Virgil says,
We are now in the realm of the Harpies, the corrupt and inverted angels which taunted Aeneas.
He tells Dante they are now in the second subcircle. Dante hears disembodied voices all around him and becomes very fearful. He sees nobody around to make such noises. Virgil speaks to Dante and says the souls are within the forest around him. He commands Dante to break off a branch of one of the trees so that he may discover the truth of this place. The tree begins to bleed black blood, and it complains at Dante for harming it, accusing the poet of having no pity. The tree's voice sounds like burning wood and spitting sap. The tree explains that he and the rest of those in the forest were once the souls of men. Dante drops the branch to the floor, suddenly terrified and confused. Virgil says to the tree that he is sorry for Dante and that Dante didn't listen to him properly when he broke off the branch. Had Dante recognised the words in what Virgil had once written, this would not have happened to the tree. He says to the tree that the pain is necessary to teach Dante and that he feels for its suffering. He offers the tree recompense of telling Dante his story so that Dante can repeat it when back in the living world. The tree is the soul of Pietro della Vigna, an Italian diplomat. He was a chancellor and a secretary to Emperor Frederick II. Della Vigna was born in 1190, and he rose to power very quickly, dealing as a high-ranking diplomat between the emperor and the pope. After being falsely accused of hurting the dignity of the Italian sovereign, he was thrown in jail. After a while, the emperor came to visit him, and in his weakened state he was unable to speak to defend himself of his accused actions. Pietro was blinded by having his eyes removed by the prison guard. He begged for mercy of death, but it was not provided to him. So in 1249, he killed himself by smashing his head against a wall until his brain was dashed from his skull. Della Vigna says,
Envy is a poisonous woman of the night. She was my downfall. I was loved by Emperor Frederick II, and those around me spread vicious rumors and jealousy. I killed myself in disgust of those lies.
Della Vigna begs Dante to clear his name once he returns to the real world. Virgil gives Dante a chance to ask questions, but Dante feels so bad for the soul he doesn't have the will to ask. Virgil starts asking questions in Dante's stead. He asks how one becomes a tree, and if it's possible to be saved from such a fate. Della Vigna responds,
It is clear to me that I am no more the spirit of a man. When Minos judges us and throws us to our determined punishment, we find ourselves in this forest with no path to walk on. We stop in our tracks, take root, and join the others as trees tortured by harpies forever. We long to be returned to our bodies so much that we fashion these wooden bodies to be our own. Because of this, on Judgment Day, when our soul and body are supposed to be reunited, our true skin will do nothing but lay on our stumps.
A commotion suddenly breaks out, and Dante sees two naked men running from a pack of dogs. The slower soul begs to be killed, and the faster mocks him for being slow. The faster jumps into a thorny bush, and the hounds rip him apart, carrying off the pieces. These two sinners represent the spendthrifts, the reckless squanderers. They didn't destroy their own lives, but they destroyed their means to live. The squanderers here were not sufferers of incontinence like those in Circle 4, but deliberately did this to themselves. Dante and Virgil approach the bush and it cries out in pain. It states the soul gained nothing by choosing him as his hiding place. Virgil asks who he is, and the bush replies by asking the two poets to gather up all of his lost leaves and twigs. He states that he was a Florentine citizen who hanged himself. He predicts that Florence will never be at peace. Dante, also with a love of Florence, is sympathetic to the sinner, and he gathers all of the lost leaves as best as he can. The two poets head further onwards once more. That's it, thanks for watching. In the next episode, we'll be continuing onwards into the third subcircle of violence and getting up close and personal with Geryon. Keep up to date with the channel on Facebook and Twitter. Consider checking out my Patreon page for more content and extra perks. Massive shoutouts to the voice actors in this episode. As always, you can find out more about them in the description. I'll see you in the next video. Toodles!